Avy. Hi, Avy. Hey, great to see you.
Ooh,
Hello,
Thanks for
hello. How
joining
are
us.
you?
Oh, you got
Good,
Black
good.
Panther. You got Black Panther behind you today.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen it yet. But
No, I didn't either. My son was trying to get me to go along with him this week, but I had a few too many things going on. Yeah.
awesome. So Robert and Ivy should be joining us shortly.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Here's Rob. Yeah, he's been trying to join us, but we were having some trouble getting him connected. There he is. He's back. All right. Well, he's trying to join us. So anyway, we'll just talk a little bit while he's trying to sort out his connection. There, we had him on for a minute. We got his picture, but we didn't get any sound.
Okay.
Um,
mm.
okay, he's updating his camera settings. All right, I'll leave him
There's
on the side for now. All right. Yes. All right. So, Avy, good morning, and
Good
yes,
morning.
you're here to tell us all about Oakland Creates Festival coming up
Yes.
on December 4th. Is it?
Exactly.
mm.
So, what is that? Tell us about Oakland Creates.
So it's actually a small zine fest, highly curated by me, organized by myself. And this year I've actually got help from Shani Ely, who is also a creator. So she's been helping me behind the scenes, organize everything. She's been an awesome blessing. But Oakland Creates is essentially a mini zine fest, art and comics fest that sort of celebrates and welcomes a more diverse group of artists. Different than what you would see maybe at a larger mainstream fest. Um, Basically, what happened, why I started Oakland Creates, is because I would go to open call for artists in Oakland and sort of just didn't get the feeling of being welcome, even though at the time, back when Art Murmur and First Fridays first started, it was a much higher percentage of Black people in Oakland. I want to say it was around 20, I want to say 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. But it felt awkward to go into sort of white spaces in Oakland and not feel welcome, not feel wanted. And so I wanted to create a fest where everyone was celebrated, everybody was welcome equally, and people could feel comfortable showing their art and the diverse culture that they had, whatever your background was, whether that's queer, Black, Asian, Latino, um, disabled, trans, young, old. You could just come, feel welcome, feel honored in the space. And so I started Oakland Creates based on that. And I also felt like, I could promote, I have a 9 to 5, so I could promote a show just for myself and rent a gallery and do a show just for me. But I felt like, let's bring other people in that may not have the resources that I do. And so I wanted to do a group show. And that's kind of how it started. It started in a basement warehouse of a good friend of mine, very, very small. And she loaned her space out to me and other artists to come. I want to say that was 2015 when we first did it. And it was amazing, great turnout, great response. Artists, like I said, collaborated to bring the show to life, and we've kind of done it every year since. So it's become an annual thing. And so, yeah, that's kind of what Oakland Creates is. If you want to feel celebrated, if you want to feel included and welcome, um, come to Oakland Creates, apply as a tabler. You can volunteer. We still need volunteers. But yeah, we just want to see a diverse group of artists showing what they have, maybe new to tabling, and maybe you're a new and emerging artist, and we welcome those folks who've never tabled before.
Yeah, that can
So
be a
yeah,
sort of scary experience, can't it? Like you're a young artist
right,
and you haven't done it before, and you
right,
you don't think you're any good, and you're
exactly.
not sure you're ready yet. But really, once you get out and put your feet in the water, there, you'll realize that it's a lot of fun, and nobody's going to judge you.
Right, exactly. And just, just feel good in the space, have a good time. Like I said, it's highly curated. It's very much on vibes, good energy, good people. So it's not just about art, but it's also about celebrating the community, helping out, educating people. Some people don't know what a zine is. Some people don't have never maybe seen diverse books or are aware that you can independently publish your book. A lot of the creators in Oakland Crates this year have produced their own books, whether that's through an indie publishing house or they've done it themselves. Like Robert, our featured artist, who hopefully can get on. I know he's
Yes.
having technical
I think he's
difficulties.
here. Well, yeah, I've got some people waiting on the sides, so I'm gonna I can bring in some more.
So he has a new art book out, and he created it himself, published it himself, designed it. I think his wonderful wife designed the layout. They did it all themselves, and so we have stuff like that that you can pick up directly from the artist. And so I wish he could tell you a little bit more about the concept for the book. It's an awesome book, and he also has a children's book out. He has a wonderful story about how he didn't enjoy reading as a child, and so he wanted to create a picture book, a art children's book for his son when he became a young father, so that his son would enjoy reading from the beginning. And so that
yes.
is
All
just
right.
awesome. Yeah. So I
Well,
hope
I think he's here. Shall I try and I'll try and get him in, and I'll bring
perfect.
Dale in, who's waiting here too. And we've also got Ivy waiting in the green room. Should I bring her on now, or
That
should
would be awesome. Yeah,
All right, we'll
she's a
bring them all on.
tabler. She's tabled, I think,
Oh
since
man.
2017. She's tabled before. And so she's an amazing artist who really talks about mental health awareness and self-awareness and mindfulness and celebrating self-care and how to treat yourself well. And so these are the kind of things that we um, bring to our community, so that just good, useful information and art, like I said, that makes you feel good, you know.
All right, thanks. All right, well, great. I'm going to bring them in. Okay, here's Rob, and here's Ivy.
Hey Rob.
And well, we've also got
Hey,
Dale
Ivy.
with us today, so we're a full house.
Dale.
Right, wait, might can't maybe Ivy disappeared. But I brought Dale in. Dale, you might have to hang out a little bit. I'm not sure how many people I can have here. Let me try one. Okay, there we go.
Wow.
All right.
Look like
Yes,
the
all right,
Brady
well-
Bunch now.
Oh yeah, but now we're like the Brady Bunch.
Talk at
Yes,
once.
we're all here. All right, yes. So hi, welcome Rob, welcome Ivy. Thank you very much for joining us today. Yes, so if you haven't seen the show before, we just we just have a sort of free-ranging discussion usually, really, about whatever's going on. But yeah, Rob, why don't we start with you, and why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Like Avy sort of told us a little bit about what you're doing. And I can probably bring up some pictures of what you did as well. I'll go and look on your website.
So, Rob, I just kind of explained why you created Farrakhan's Flat Top, about your son's literacy and reading, and then about your new art book as well. So, I just gave a brief synopsis of what you do.
Okay, right on. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Rob. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Avy, for having me. Thanks, Chuck, and all of y'all for having me. My name's Rob. I'm from Oakland, and I started off as a kids book illustrator in terms of tabling events mostly. As Avy said, I self-published a children's book because I wanted to see a book about kids like my son and like myself, and that led me down a path to creating community with people in the kids book world. And then to working in kids books, I'm in public art doing murals. So I get the chance to be around a lot of different types of areas, and I've had the chance to table at Zinefest and go to comic events and table at maybe. And
Yes, exactly.
This event is really awesome to be there. I'm really honored to be a guest there and to contribute to it, just because, like Avy was, are not too many events, especially outside of a bubble, where you can kind of access some art that's a little bit different from the mainstream, or some books or some zines or comics. And it's really important. I know it was for me when I was a kid, to meet people, shake their hand, talk to them about what they do, and to see just kind of the diverse creative people, their work, their mind, their energy, all of that stuff.
That's
So
cool.
some of
What
the
you
work,
said about
you're-
like I guess. Uh-oh. Wait.
Go ahead.
Did we lose?
Yeah, well, hang on, we're a bit of a full house here. Dale, I'm gonna turn you off for a second. There we go. Sorry, Dale.
I was gonna say, Rob, it's cool that you're doing that, because I was one of those kids that really struggled with reading in school, and then later on in life, I realized that it could have been a better introduction if they had more engaging material. I mean, I was like in 7th or 8th grade by the time I read something that I actually engaged with.
Mm.
I feel that way about music education, like piano lessons. You have to engage people. And if the material is not engaging, that's a rough start. So,
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't enjoy reading actually until I became an adult and was out of college, out of high school. Then I started to find things that I could really resonate with, and part of that was because I was looking for it actively for my son, who was a little one at the time.
yeah, that's great. That's about the same experience I had. I got so I had it had been years from my introduction of reading where I actually started to realize it could be enjoyable. For a long time, it was just a grind, you know.
Yeah,
And I think
Rob, I
that's
like that you look like you're doing a lot of work out in the community, during real life scenes of. I'm guessing these people that you know, or you, for example, this illustration I'm showing here, is that
So,
from folks you know, or are these sort of amalgamated characters?
usually what I try to do is pull inspiration from people I know or people I see around the way, in the city or in the Bay Area. But like this image, for example, that you're looking at is a cover of a children's book about a little kid who is born biologically female but wants to identify as a boy, and it's written by the mom, a real life story about their life. And so this was an illustration from that book.
Oh, great! Yeah, wow.
That's cool. That's from the mom's
Good.
perspective, you know.
Yes, very nice. All right, shall we say a little hello to Ivy now? Hi, Ivy.
Hello.
Bring you up there. Hey, how you doing? And I'll bring up some of your work over here too.
Oh yeah. Do you guys have it on hand? I have like a sketchbook with me too. I can just show
Oh, great.
you.
Well, Avy sent me a link to your Instagram here.
Well,
Um,
sweet. Yeah, I'm really excited for Oakland Creates this year. I've been living in the Bay. Well, I lived in the Bay for 7 years, and I just moved to Albuquerque. But
oh,
even while I was planning my move, I booked a ticket to the Bay just for Oakland Creates because it's one of my favorite events as far as like Bay Area zine gatherings go. I think what makes Oakland Creates so special to me is that Avy is like the curator for this one. Oh yeah, that's an animation I did really long time
cool.
ago.
yes, I like that one. That's great.
Yeah, I worked pretty hard on that one. I had a buddy animate it. All my stuff is hand drawn and hand illustrated, and I have a very comic journal style. I got very fortunate in the Bay Area and found a collective of folks, Mission Mini Comics. Yeah, those are some mini comics right there that somebody's made when I was moving to New Mexico. But Mission Mini Comics, they've been based in San Francisco for as long as I've been alive, like 25 years. And their stuff talks a lot about harm reduction. And that's, really that's a really important topic in the Bay Area and really the world right now, ensuring that everyone has equal access to shelter and basic human rights. And what I think is so special about the comic genre is that it can put those really like emotionally heavy-handed controversial topics into like a compatible reading format to kind of spread the word, get people more involved. My zines personally, like Avy said, are very personal. They're all like comic journals, just me being super vulnerable. And yeah, I'm just really excited to make my trip over to Oakland Creates and see everybody. I really like the curation for that event. I'm really looking forward.
Right on.
Yes, lovely, lovely. Yes, so I'm looking at all the different things you've done here. Yes, so yeah, this is you.
Oh yeah, that's my Buddy Boop spinoff.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
my little dog. Yeah.
great.
And Ivy does some in-person portraits too, which are amazing. She'll rip them out in maybe like 10 minutes flat, if that, and they're just so spot on, and they're so like perfect caricatures. And I really love her spirit too. Her energy is amazing. She just brings sunshine wherever she goes too. So I'm super happy for her to join us. like she said, I curate it just based on not just your art, but like your energy that you bring and who you are as a person.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to curate. I remember the first time I actually worked with a creative department and how much better it felt to be surrounded by like my and just luckily we were all kind of on the same wavelength, and that was a completely different work experience. You know,
Yeah.
it made going to work like fun for kind of like the first time in my life. So yeah, yeah. I mean that's interesting. It's not just based on work; it's based on kind of like vibe.
Vibe and just if I've met you, you'll have a better chance of getting in. Like I said, it's privately funded. I did a GoFundMe, but it is mostly out of my pocket. So I felt comfortable saying, "Hey, this is who gets in, and this is who doesn't get in." And it's typically not anything bad that you may present. Although there were some odd entries to the application this year, very odd, but it's really about your community engagement, because that's what we're trying to build, is a better world. Literally, it sounds hokey, but I mean, we really want to encourage people that are doing good stuff outside of just their artwork and in the community, and that's super key to me.
and give people a chance to connect in real life more. Lately, I've been, especially after the pandemic, and I was feeling this a bit before, that I was needed. I've been working out of my home studio here for a while. I was really wanting to get out and about a lot more in sort of 2018 and 2019, and then
Right.
we all got shut down. And but yeah, now I think people are really itching to get out, and I really, since I have been this year, I really sort of feel the benefits of connection with people in real life.
Yep.
It really makes a big difference to.
And a huge difference. I think, like you said, you've worked in spaces where you're not comfortable, but it's a job, so you go there. But I've also been at Zinefest, where I've been sat next to a person that didn't like me, or I've tabled at bigger Comic Cons where I've tabled next to someone who's just obnoxious, and it makes a huge impact on not only yourself, but the event feeling, and the people that might potentially stop at your table may keep going because of who you're sitting next to, quite honestly.
Yes, there's definitely a rule about, if you stop at one table, you can't stop at the next table. That's like a
but
hard rule of convention.
but it's a real thing to, like you said, feel good about where you work, and this is our job. This is what we do, and so you want to feel good in your space.
Yes, so Dale was saying he's not been to Oakland Creates and was wondering how it compares to the SF Zinefest, which just occurred, and was a very large event.
It's a lot smaller. I think we have about 22 tablers, where I'm an organizer for San Francisco Zinefest, and we had over 400 applicants, and we, I believe, had upwards almost 200 tablers. So it's a very minute. It's a drop in the bucket compared to San Francisco Zinefest. I think we had almost 200 tablers, so it's very small. We have a button making table, a zine making table, um, and typically we will have, you can draw with us, so you can watch people create or join in and make your own zine, that kind of thing. Uh, so we do have that aspect, and then again, in San Francisco Zine Fest has a kid section. We do have a lot of kid friendly artwork and books and zines, but also I feel like just about everyone that I accept into the show, you're safe to. It's a safe space, and you can bring your kids or your grandma, and they'll be comfortable looking at the artwork and the zines. Uh, like I said, I had some interesting entries that I was like, oh, maybe not for my show. I personally, as an adult, might want to see it, but not for Oakland Creates, because it really is. I want everybody to feel good and not be disturbed or shocked. At the same token, I do want a wide variety of exhibitors. So we do update the Oakland Creates Instagram, so you can kind of see their page and who they are before you come. I think I posted a link in the chat to the Oakland Creates Instagram. So I've been highlighting exhibitors, and you can kind of get to know them beforehand and see what they make and who they are. So you'll hopefully will buy beforehand and buy on December 4th as well. Go snatch their wonderful, amazing work. But I'll keep updating with new exhibitors, hopefully every day or every other day. as we're going into the holiday season, so the updates may not be as frequent. But I have a GoFundMe and an Instagram as well as a Facebook page. But the key place is the Instagram page with a lot of updates for everybody, for all of the platforms, and you can find information there and support us. We have a bonfire shop. You can buy things on my Etsy. I'll be doing a giveaway and a raffle soon, so definitely go to the Instagram for all those updates. We'll be giving away from some merch and some custom Oakland Creates fun custom stuff that will knock your socks off. So.
Oh, great. Yeah, sounds brilliant. All right, I'm going to post some of your links here. All right, here's the Oakland.
I'm going there right now. At least I think I am.
Do you need it in the chat? I'll put it in the chat.
I tried to click on that, and it's in the chat, but for some reason it didn't take me there. But I found it.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. Now that you talked about these entries that were too blue or whatever, I'm like, that's all I want to see. It's like the thing I can't see. I'm like, what are those? What's in those entries?
Well, email me and I'll send you their link. I'll be more than happy to share their work with you.
Okay.
You're an adult. You're over 21, so you were warned.
I mean, I like, you guys don't know this, but I'm a musician and I'm kind of like a hip hop person. And, my daughter's 15. She's listened to all the lyrics that me and my bandmates have written. So
Okay.
I'm pretty, like, I don't know, pretty liberal in that regard. I'm like, it's a performance. Okay. Don't confuse this with, this isn't your dad. Obviously you grew up with me. This is a key thing, knowing the difference between a performance and real life. It's more confusing when you're young, I think.
Right.
You're not the character you play on the internet.
I am not. Well, I think I might be the character I play on the internet, but definitely not in that music.
All right, well, we got some other questions here from Dale. Dale's very interested in art supplies and processes. So he's asking if you guys prefer working analog versus digital. Looking at your work, look like you're mostly doing analog stuff there. Rob, why don't you answer that first?
For me, I think if I'm working with a client, like someone who's a commercial client, whether that be an organization or a small company, I would probably work in digital in the process leading up to it, just so that it's easier to make changes. And then when it comes to personal work or things that I do for books, usually it's traditional.
What about you, Ivy?
I strictly do analog. Everything I create is hand drawn and hand illustrated. I was taught by self-taught artists, so really just like pen and paper is what I live by. Yeah.
Yes, I'm very self-taught too. Well, I take some classes here and there over the years. You pick things up as you go. But that's often the case. All right, and then question for Avy. Amber's asking, what problems did you run into trying to set up a convention?
I think the biggest one is finding a space to fit everyone, but that is also accessible for my resources. Like I said, I do fundraise, but I'm paying for it myself. So finding a venue that I can afford and that fits everyone. We're happy to use East Bay Community Space. It's a wonderful space, but we grew out of it, quite frankly, and so I needed to find a bigger venue. And so that cost more money, and that's kind of why I started the GoFundMe. But that is the biggest thing, is fitting everyone into a space, especially now with COVID. You want to have people 6 feet apart, or if you can. So that requires a lot more space, and that is the public can get to on public transportation, or if they drive, if they have parking. And considering all those things, the venue is the biggest hurdle. Right now, I'm working with the rental company to get tables and chairs, and that is not a big hurdle, but I do need volunteers to load in things and load things out. And I'm just one person who definitely cannot lift anything anymore. So, like I said, I need volunteers to help load stuff, pick up things from the rental company, because we're doing it on a Sunday. They don't necessarily deliver, so, or in the time frame that we need. So those are the two biggest hurdles. But also that grants us, doing it all myself grants it, or with help from volunteers like Shawnee, that gives us a lot of liberty, like I said, to be able to curate it, to be able to design the signage, the poster, the marketing is all with our hands in it, so we can present the event the way we need to. There's been a lot of awesome people sort of promoting the event, like you. Thank you so much for having us on, Chuck. And I think those are the big hurdles, but also I'm grateful that we're able to present people in the proper light and do things that we really want to do ourselves. Yeah, but any more
Yes, it's
questions?
quite,
I'm happy to
yeah.
answer.
Well, it's interesting what you were saying about location, because that's sort of like the big problem that the big conventions have as well. I mean, like, there's the SF Fan Expo coming up at the end of November, which I'm going to be exhibiting at. Will you be at that one?
I won't. We actually were asked if we wanted a table, and I think we were all burnt out from San Francisco Zinefest.
Yeah, that's only the weekend before, isn't it?
But I'm very careful about new shows, because sometimes they aren't ready for the city that they're in, or ready for the crowds, like you said. So
yeah,
I let a show marinate, get some experience. And this is their first time in San Francisco, I think, right?
Yes. I got involved because Andrew Farrago at the Cartoon Art Museum said they were getting involved, and so I figured I'd jump in because it had been a while, and but it's usually a problem for the big conventions like Comic-Con. WonderCon left because the Moscone Center wouldn't let them book it, or I think the problem was that the Moscone Center were like, well, we want to hold out and wait and see if a bigger, like a tech convention comes in and make us more money, so they wouldn't really let them schedule it far enough in advance, and
right,
that's why they moved. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we've ran into similar issues with San Francisco Zinefest with booking a new venue, because typically we were at the county fair building and we moved to the Metreon. And so you do run into those issues of price point, and then accessibility, but then the competition, as you're saying, with bigger events, and the vendor for the space, like you said, might want a bigger company, or they may have overbooked, because we ended up having some technical issues with stuff like that, is who was booked before us and after us, and permits and zoning, and it's a lot to consider. So I'm glad you're doing the fan expo, though. I definitely want to know how it goes.
Well, it should be fun. Yes. Okay. So we got some more questions. Another question here from Dale is asking about mini comics and zines. So, what do you guys? We'll start with Ivy on this one. What do you think of the future of zines versus web comics shared via social media?
Well, I think that there's a really promising future for zines. I'm going to speak more on the zines because I keep up more with zines than I do web comics. But I'm seeing really like a huge uptick in like zines. I mean, for sure, like no one in my close life knows what I'm doing. I'm like, oh, I'm a full-time artist. And they're like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, they're called zines. And then I'm like, don't worry, I didn't expect you to know what they were to begin with. But like especially some of these zine fests are celebrating like their 10-year anniversaries and stuff like that. Like I go all over the US for zine fests, so I kind of see like in certain cities like the longevity of zines. And I think what's really special about zines is that like I feel like a lot of people consider the heyday of zines to be the 90s, when DIY culture was really doing well and without the influence of technology. But
yeah, we didn't have the internet. We had to make a zine in order to like show it to anybody.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, right now I'd say for zines, like I'm just really seeing it be such a like pinpoint for each city to kind of get all the like like all the people that don't necessarily know where they fit in, or like don't always feel included. Like these zine fests are really like a celebratory point for them. And it's so cool too to see like this slight the differences in like zine culture when you go from city to city, and even event to event. Like San Francisco Zine Fest, and Oakland Creates, they're different events entirely with different feels, and you kind of have to be in a different mindset when you're going to each event. So I know Avy knows what I'm talking about, but so that's kind of where I think the future of zines is going. I think it's just going to be more and more powerful and talked about. Maybe not mainstream, but definitely I think there's going to be a day where someone like me is going to tell their family, like, I do this for a living, and they'll be like, oh, zines, yes, I've heard of those, you know.
Or, you know, you graduate from zines to books or something. That,
yeah,
you know.
something, yeah.
How would you guys define, like, I mean, I think I know what a zine is, but how would you differentiate that from like a magazine? Like what qualifies as a zine? Like,
I'll Rob answer this one then. How about Rob? Can you define for Chris the difference?
I mean, I have my own
Sure.
definition, but I could be wrong.
I think you generally when it comes to zines, it's more handmade. I wouldn't even use
Right.
the term self-published just because it's maybe that as well, but it's definitely handmade. Like you can take and draw them, and so each individual one is a one of a kind, or you can make something that on your computer, or you can do the drawings by hand and take it to a copy mat. I mean, the first time I made one, that's how I did it, was just making the drawings with ink on paper and then copying it at a copy mat, and then making like a nice color copy of the cover. So I think one of the coolest things about still finding new audiences, there's something cool about them, like, you know, rock music or hip hop or something that is always kind of inspiring a new audience. I was doing a children's book reading at a school, a bunch of 3rd and 4th graders, and I brought a bunch of the mini comics and zines that I got from the Zinefest to them so that they could see them, because they were learning about how to make their own stories. And they flipped out, because not just because of the format and, you know, how small it is or how DIY it was, but because of the topics. And I think zines give you the creative freedom to kind of find your path, like to walk where you want to go or kind of explore what you want to do. Whereas if you're going into comics or children's book publishing, that's with a publisher, the path would be a little bit more stringent in terms of the box they want you to fit in. Whereas with a zine, you kind of have your room to spread your wings and fly. And those kids really, they dug it. They just got into it right away. So I think that they will always find new audiences, and it will keep getting more and more well-known, as Ivy said, and creative.
Yes, great. Yes, I put some zines together myself the other day out of my Urfspace comics. You know, I haven't done a zine for a while, and it was really nice. Sort of, I just printed some at home, folded them up. I did them on like large legal. It was 2 sheets of legal backed up, and then I sort of folded them and made little 32-page booklets. So it was very nice. But you know, you can see. I mean, there are people that do them just like Murphy Milburn. You know Murphy, right? He does like very tiny little zines. You know, this big, and they're probably like 1 sheet of A4 or something, like, and really short little story. And
awesome.
I just love that little format. You know, you can do so much with so little, and just put out all different stories. There was another group at Zinefest that also had like tons and tons of little mini comics. I just really like that idea.
And they did also start in the music punk rock scene too, where the fan zines, and so I'm interested to find out. Yeah, what do you think? Like musically, did you see a lot of zines?
I mean, I didn't, because I'm kind of like one of my bandmates, one of these guys that we go back about 15 years now, and I like mixed 2 of his albums. He would know a lot more about this than I would. I kind of grew up like middle class and kind of insulated from punk until I got like older. And my connection to punk now is really kind of like it's more about the philosophy around punk than it is actually the music style. So I mean, I probably got onto zines like in the 90s, but kind of as in a weird way like an outsider, even though I was in bands and I was playing live and stuff like that. So I'm sorry, what was your question?
Just what your experience with zines was. I mean,
you know what it was? It was like punk rock shows. I was gonna say very punk. This seems very punk to me. And you know, this idea of like bands making cassette tapes, which we did at one point. You know, we had a cassette demo. We never did zines, but we were very do it yourself, and we like printed up the labels and we inserted our own label into the cassette. And you know, later on burned our own CDs. But I would go to shows and I would see zines around. It just wasn't something that, like, I guess I wasn't punk enough.
No, that's where it started, partially where it started. And definitely, I didn't think of the cultural class element of it, but yeah, because punk really was big in the poor neighborhood where I grew up. Punk and new age and that kind of stuff was super big. And it's funny because I don't think people realize that culturally black people were connected to a lot of early punk music and new age music, and especially electronic music. So I mean, a lot of the a lot of the early groups in the 80s uh, and 90s, gosh, I mean, if you look at early hip hop, they
Oh yeah.
incorporated or sampled a lot of I don't know why it's slipping my mind right now. The group that did Daft Punk, a lot of Daft Punk, a lot of new age stuff. I know you're probably familiar with Blondie collaborating with Fab Five, Freddy, and
Yeah.
I mean, because that's a long kind of intertwined history of music culture. So yeah, that kind of resonates when you say, "Oh yeah, I was middle class, so I didn't get exposed to," because it's really all street music, really, right? So or garage band type stuff.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like punk came out of kind of like an environment. There's a certain environment that created punk. And I
Mm-hmm.
mostly wasn't in that environment. And there's a certain kind
Yeah,
of environment that hip hop came out of,
the
you know?
same one. That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
There's a
yes,
lot of
yes, yeah.
similarities. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
that early like punk in Britain came out in the really sort of started in the 70s. Like music had got it sort of got very into prog rock, you know, which was quite sort of intellectual, like, you know, sort of university students sort of doing all this very sort of complicated stuff that wasn't necessarily like immediately, you know, guessable. And then I think punk, and then also then meanwhile you had a lot of social problems, like really growing up in the country, and like labor movement was really sort of growing a lot, and it was sort of and then Thatcher comes along in the 80s star, and they're like punk sort of, I don't know which came first, but they sort of come around together, like the more right-wing government comes over, and then punk's like coming up at the same time. Yes, as a sort of reaction to that.
Yeah, because I was big into Goldie and The Clash and gosh, so many bands from the 80s are just indie artists. Gosh, that it kind of
Yeah.
I can't put my finger
I
on
just
them, but
discovered X-Ray Specs recently. I hadn't really been familiar with them. They were pretty good.
yeah.
All right, so let's see now. Let's see if Dale and Amber have been asking us questions here. All right, okay. Dale is okay. Well, first, Amber's got a question about ash cans. Ash cans in main. I never really understood what ash cans are actually. Ash cans in mainstream comics too from the 90s. People always talk about ash cans. I don't know what they are. Does anyone know what an ash can is?
can I guess? I could be totally wrong. Is it the thing? Is it like that convenience thing with your cigarette?
I don't know.
Oh,
I remember people
wait.
talking a lot
Oh
about ash
yeah,
cans
yeah.
in the
Oh, ash
90s when I got
cans.
here.
Yeah, Mission Mini did that for a while. They had did the ash can thing, and I no, sorry, that just reminded me right away, because people will ask me when we talk about Mission Mini, they're like, "Are they still out on the corners, like handing out Mission Minis in their ash cans?" I'm like, "No, they've given that up. That was a pre-pandemic era Mission Mini. We're in the 2020s now." But yeah, no, that was the coolest thing when I even learned that was something that they did. I also thought it was sweet, because I know there's like a lot of like pinup things of like people with like the ash cans, and I just thought it was really sweet that like these really like crust punk dudes who've been doing this since the 90s were like, yeah, we're gonna go out there with our ash cans, the corner of 16th and Mission, and strut our comics and make a buck. Like, I don't know, I thought that was cool.
Great. Yes, yes. Now, okay, and then Dale says he didn't really understand about zines until he went to the Alternative Press Expo. There weren't many comic shops, but Space Cat had a zine rack in the 90s. All right, yes, when I first got here in the 90s, you'd find zine racks in like a lot of sort of record and bookstores and things. And now he only sees them in a few independent bookstores in San Francisco. All right, yes. So, yes, I guess distribution of zines outside of zine festivals is a question. Do either of you guys know anything about that? Rob, what about you? Have you like distributed? How do you sort of distribute your work outside of convention or like something like Oakland Creates? Is there other opportunities to get it out there?
Well, since I work in kids books, there are small distribution companies that will sell them and get them to schools and libraries. But I was just gonna say that I think zines are making their way into comics in a big way. Not that they haven't been in the past, but I think that I think Ivy was mentioning that earlier too, that they're coming back, or there's like a new generation of people in them. So I see them a lot at comics events too, where people are making mini comics and then kind of skewing off to the zine world. But I would say, yeah, besides conventions, online sales, and like really kind of building up just kind of an awareness in your community first, and then maybe nationally about what you do, and then people come to seek you out and look for your stuff.
Yeah, there's a couple, bookstores in the East Bay that you can get your zines in, but mostly my zines have been in San Francisco bookstores, or even small bookstores in LA or in Seattle, or what little comic shops typically have a section for zines. But a lot, of. Go ahead.
I was going to say, is there like a zine distributor? There used to be a few sort of zine distributors around, like
Microcosm.
Well, okay, yes. I mean, there's Last Gasp, the independent publisher, but there was a smaller group in San Francisco. I forget, but they're probably defunct now. Yes, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a guy in Brooklyn that was distributing my comics and zines. I can't remember his group name. I want to say they have a storefront, and he does travel with zines. Brooklyn something. Oh my gosh, I can't remember. But yeah, there are a couple small presses that will take your zines around the country for you. I wouldn't call them necessarily distributors, but
What about like record stores? I kind of like when I was working at a record store, I think we had zines. It was like, it's over 20 years ago, but it seems like that's at punk shows, and record stores is where I remember seeing.
Yeah.
But I don't know how many record shops there are anymore.
There's a lot of leftist bookstores that will carry them too, like Red Emma's out there, Revolutionary Books, Blue Stockings in New York. There's a bunch of little stores like that will carry them.
Right.
Okay, yes, and you said Microcosm on the West Coast and Desert Island in Brooklyn. Great. And Amber saying in Minneapolis, the cartoonist Conspiracy would put a zine box together each year and sell the box for about $30 each, with about 30 in the box for one each per zine in the box. So yeah, that's quite a good idea. A zine mystery box.
It's like a compilation album.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Let's see. I'm going to see if I'm going to bring Dale back on here because he's usually got quite a few questions. Dale, hello.
Also, you can, if you're the first 20 attendees to Oakland Creates, you'll get a swag bag with a bunch of zine and comics related goodies in there. So if you're first to come through the door, you may get a couple zine stickers or buttons or pins or art supplies in your swag bag. So make sure you come early.
All right, Dale, you've got some questions for us. Dale's he's a certified Apple genius, former Apple genius. So he's usually got some good questions. Do you have any questions for the guests today, Dale?
Yeah, actually I do. First of all, thank you for coming on. Usually our shows degrade into arguments about cannibalism.
Once we pass it, yeah.
Yeah, we have to mention it at least once.
We bring down.
Yes, right. You got it.
But my question is, as your zine artists, then you've been to a lot of zine shows, so you've probably seen all the different printing methods of how zines are printed and bound. In your own experience, what do you think your preferred format of creating a zine, printing it and binding it and trimming it? And at zine shows, what leaps out to you as a sellable, economic to produce zine?
Ivy, why don't you take that one?
I'll take it.
Well, no, I've seen how Chuck makes his zines. In fact, I have an example here. No, that's a postcard.
Oh yeah, look, there's one of my Urfspace mini zines I made recently. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Oh, that's
So-
very cool.
I'm curious, how do you guys make your zine? Are you taking it? You know, I remember the old days, like taking it to Kinko's, rest in peace. Do you guys have laser printers? Did you buy a big paper cutter? I mean, what's it like for you guys to produce zines for a show?
Well, I'll be the first to say I am accident prone. So me cutting, folding, and pressing and stapling things would end very badly for me. I have tried it numerous times. I always staple my hand to paper or cut the mess out of my hands or get super bad paper cuts. I know, make fun of me. Paper cuts are a real thing.
They are.
But folding that many pieces of paper and keeping them in order, oh my God. They'd fall on the floor and they'd just be out of order and I'd be cussing for like 20 minutes. So I typically only fold like the individual mini, like super mini one pagers. If it requires correlation or staples or big production, I'll leave that to a small print place. I do try to use local or independently owned printers. Shout out to 133 Art down in LA. Get your stuff printed there. Black owned small little printer. But yeah, for me, I'm so accident prone. Unless it's a like accordion fold or like just like a one-off 2-page thing, I'll leave it to printers to collate and staple and all that. But I definitely want to hear like how other people make stuff because I'm not necessarily traditionally so don't do what I do. That's what I'm saying. Fold and cut all you want, but I know I'll come with band-aids and hospital stories. So.
Ivy.
Yeah, it really took me a while to figure out pricing for zines and my own art and things like that. Like I wasn't trained in art school, so with drawing, I never thought like, oh, I'm gonna make a buck off of this one day. I mean, I'm a full-time artist now, so that's kind of where I started from. I know that the first show I ever did, I was like so fresh-faced, like just someone was hosting a gallery and he was like, if you make zines, I will put your zines in the show. And I was like, oh man, I better make zines. So I just went to a copy shop and it was Copy Central in San Francisco. Rest in peace, that location is gone, but I owe them so much because I really just came in there with like Post-its of what I wanted the cover to be, what I wanted the page numbers to be. I knew that I had to make it divisible by 4, and they just made me the PDF and they printed the copies for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. This cost me so much money though. I better sell all my zines. And then I sold all my zines, which was great. But I was also like, I only broke even like $10. Like I can only get a sandwich with all this labor I did, but it still felt really good. And now I'm at a point where I don't print it like I'll get my PDFs done at Copy Central still. I still do it at Berkeley. So even when I'm visiting for Oakland Creates, I'm like, and then I'm going to stop by Copy Central because they're the only people I trust now because I don't do the DIY myself. I have friends who do it, and I think that's like incredible. That just was not. I feel like everyone has their own like way that they publish their stuff. They find their stride. My stride nowadays has been getting the PDFs done at Copy Central and then sending the PDFs to PS Print so I can get it in bulk, which is always like, it's always like a big investment, but I just have to remind, and then I had to do the calculations. And then I was like, okay, as cute and fun as it was to charge my zines for $5 a piece, I'm not at that point anymore. We're in it. Like I have to like make it work. So I calculated if I charge 10 a piece, then I would actually like break even in a way that was like more than just a sandwich. So yeah, I think
well, breaking even is sort of that's a good outcome for any comic convention, I think. You know, but the people that you meet and the connections that you make are invaluable, and you know will last you a lifetime. So put it that way.
No, yeah, that's super important. It's not all about the economics either, but I always like to just tell people how I actually like have made it happen for myself, because I want everybody to be able to support themselves off of this if they love it, you know, or at least I want people to know that there is a way to make it happen for yourself. You know, I feel like it's really popular for artists to like humble themselves and like deprecate themselves. But I think if you love something and if you really feel like that's your greatest contribution to the world, then by all means figure out a way to make it feed you,
Yeah.
like both
100%.
spiritually and physically. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and you will if you just keep at it. That's just all it really.
But I think we all go into these cons and Zinefest like, okay, if I make my table fee, awesome. If I pay for my hotel or if I pay for my plane ticket, oh my God, that's a bonus. But I think you're right. Like, we definitely should be making a true living at it. Like, not just like not able to just pay for your lunch, which is what she's saying. And I think, yeah, if you, calculate into the cost of your books and zines that I need to pay my light bill, I need to pay my rent, and like other businesses, this is legit with other businesses too. Like, I have to cover my printing costs, my light bill, my phone bill, my like it's this is what you should do, is what I'm saying.
Well, and you should go into banking and get a nice secure job, or insurance. My friends that went into insurance, they all did very well.
But I think you should be able to make it work as an artist too. I mean, I don't necessarily. I love my 9 to 5. I like working with the students that I work with, but I would love to support myself full time as an artist. So you have to start considering, because I also do hand dyeing and tie dye too. And when I make a hoodie or if I make a custom shirt, I do have to calculate my studio rent. I'd have to calculate paying myself. A lot of time, many years, I didn't pay myself. I just tried to cover the cost of supplies. And I think we can do better, and we should do better, and expect the support to come to pay for all of that. But I'd like to, really think that it's worthwhile. If you really enjoy what you make, you should get paid. But also, if you enjoy consuming or buying things, you should feel comfortable paying a certain price for it too.
Yes.
Rob, you do children's books? Are you? So you've probably experienced a wide variety of printing technology and binding. What kind of, since you're doing more than one thing, I mean, are you on the level of one hand, you're sending things to a small press to get things bound as softback and hardback books? And are you doing anything where you're just hand making zines for shows?
I've done both. In the past, when I started doing zines, I was definitely hand making them and taking them to the copy shop, like Copy Central was the old goodie. So I've done that, and I think one of the great things about doing it yourself is you learn production, like you learn what other people are doing, and then you have a greater eye for what is quality and what is not. When it comes to kids' books, I would see to do it that way, just because kids' books have to be a little bit more durable, because kids will bend them and turn them and really try to eat the book. So with those, I've basically done my due diligence to talk to other people who've printed books and say, who did you get yours printed through? Contact those companies, raise the money for it, and then buy those books in bulk, kind of like doing the zines with PS Prints, and really just try to calculate, okay, if this is how much it costs for me to print each book, this is how much I can sell it for, and then kind of compare that with what's out on the market and what other people are selling picture books for. And it goes up, as prices and inflation goes up, so do the cost of books and getting them printed. But one of the things I would say that's really important, not only to like the production process, but to making it as an artist, is not just DIY, but DIT, do it together, where we kind of share information and resources. And I think that's one of the most important things about shows like Oakland Creates, is that you get to talk to people face to face, or the SF Zinefest, and just kind of share the wealth of knowledge or resources that we know, because each person comes with their own technique or not experience. But I hope that answers your question.
It does. It actually dovetails into a question from Amber in the chat, and I'll read it off. Would you recommend bookmaking practice for zine makers? Does a higher quality of zone affect sales, paper quality, color, etc.?
Higher quality of zine, I think.
Higher quality of zine affects sales. Yeah,
but it
it
helps if you're in the
shows.
zone. If you're really in the zone, you'll be doing good work, and people will pay more for it.
Well, I think what she's asking is, have you guys seen? Like, sorry, I say guys and dude a lot. Have you seen some people selling more zines just based on the print quality and bookbinding quality? Is there something that you shoot for so that you stand out and customers are more likely to pick up the zine and look at it?
I mean, I've just recently made my first book that is perfect bound, and so that was definitely something I considered, whether or not I could go with saddle stitch, which is stapling on the side, versus perfect bound or hardcover. And then also obviously what I can afford as an indie creator. But I do feel like if you have a perfect bound or hard bound book, that people expect to pay more. And I believe there's a real thing with perceived value, where someone, if you price your things too low, the perceived value is less, and they won't buy it, or don't take you seriously. So if you do produce a hardbound book or a perfect bound book, they expect to pay a certain price point, and you should adjust your fees based on that, sort of what the market will bear. So as Rob says, look around and see what other folks are charging for the books, and make sure you're not undercutting other artists as well. And so you want to have that sweet spot of not only what you paid for supplies and time and diligence, but also what the market is requesting that you charge, and then respecting other people's work and value, so you're not undercutting other folks. And this is all the things that I had to think about making my book, was that what is the price point that respects other and values other people's work, and price it similarly, so that like I said, I'm not undercutting them, but honoring the genre, but also just reality of what I think people can afford, and what I believe the value of my hard labor is, and my creativity is. And so there are a lot of things to consider, but definitely paper quality, color quality, and uh, like, as being someone sort of a person that likes the tactile sensation of touching and picking up books and feeling a certain quality of paper and looking at high quality color and art, it does play honestly a role in how much I'm going to charge and what I feel like people are going to pay for. So definitely, if it's a better quality paper, thicker paper, has a nice feel to it, then I will expect people to pay more, for sure. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just glad
I
we're
was
not talking about cannibalism.
I was gonna say too that I had a chance to go to a kind of an art book fair, which was kind of a somewhere in between something that's like a traditional book fair and a zine fest, where there were people from both worlds there, and I felt like people made use of lithography, of letterpress. Some people made use of screen printing and doing gold leafing on their covers, and so I think it was a nice in between where you want to have something that young people can afford, and then some things that are for the customers who can pay a little bit more. So kind of a range of pricing. And I thought that was really cool because you could, I think one of the things that was most different about the two shows where you go from a zine fest to an art book was the politics. If you go to a zine fest, people are usually more left or progressive leaning and more radical in their politics.
Mhm.
And then when you went to the art fair, they were a little bit more wine and cheese and crackers, if you feel me.
I'm sorry, I ran out for a second. It just reminded me, I was in Detroit a few years ago. Have you guys been to Detroit lately? In the last 5 years?
Not 5 years. 2015 was the last time.
I used to live in Michigan, and we used to drive through Detroit as a kid. And man, parts of Detroit look like a war zone now. And when I was there, I picked this up from a guy, this zine, How to Survive in Detroit. Because after I leafed through it, it was cracking me up so bad I knew I had to have it. But some of the things in here, see two or more dogs by themselves, walk the other way. there's there's one page in here. It's like, if it's a man up under your car, don't believe he's checking your oil. He's taking your catalytic converter.
Eh?
this thing just cracked me up, and just looking around, you know, Detroit, it seems so true. So I had to get it. Anyway, segue.
I think that's important though, because I know that like with zine quality and what sells, like yeah, like some like when I changed paper quality, I saw an uptick, but really it's that like indescribable thing where you look at a zine and you read it and it makes you smile and you're like, I have to get that. Like there are slight things you can do to like increase it for like, you know, maybe people who are more like into the sophistication of like, you know, the quality of paper or binding. But at the end of the day, I always just try to remind myself, like, it is that like distinct quality of like, I have to have this. This made me smile. This artwork's funny. I want it. Like, I feel like that gives like a zine artist longevity, and not just like an artist seeing other people feel that, but like for anybody who's selling their art, you have to feel that in your art. Like, you really have to stand behind your art and be there because it makes you happy. Because if you get more caught up in how people are receiving to your art, they're aware of that, and like it can get to you. Like, I see people ruin their own time at a perfectly good fest because they just like spiral into this obsession with sales. So
Yeah.
that's just an important one too. And I also like discontinue zines all the time. I'm like, this one was a flop. It's not making people happy the way I want it to.
In one go, girl. Like, ooh, this didn't work. Let's throw this in the trash.
Amber has an interesting question here, because you are creatives who are making zines, which take a period of time. What does your workday look like? I mean, how are you putting together the artwork panel by panel, page by page to create a zine? I mean, do you set yourself a page goal per day or week, or does it just happen when you have a vacation, or do it on the weekends? Where do you find the time, and how do you work on your zine? Is it just something you do at lunch or in a coffee shop, or what's your day like?
Well, I get the kids up and dressed and eating food and off to school, and then try to. It's not a one day. Let's finish it all in one day. It's more like in pieces over a stretch of time, and those pieces get more and more scrunched together the closer it gets to a show.
Yeah, well, that's deadlines are helpful in that regard. Yeah.
Well, I'm not embarrassed to say I make notes on my phone, in person, in real life. I have timers for everything because I am busy. Organized, I think I'm a weirdo because organizing and making art is probably not the best thing to do at the same time. So
It's really hard.
I have alarms for everything, literally, and notes, and put everything on my calendar so that I don't forget. Um, like, I put an alarm 10 minutes before this broadcast because I'm like, I will get caught up promoting Oakland Creates on Instagram or Facebook and forget to show up. So I make an alarm on my phone so I actually log in, on time. Right. So that's the big thing for me, is not necessarily what I'm doing in a day, but making sure that I schedule everything and show up on time. And I have a 9 to 5. So same with that. I have to be on the clock and not pretty soon, and log into work and do my work, and I same thing, put timers and schedule every single thing. So, and then my personal life, doctor's appointments, family, friends, unfortunately, they hate that I schedule them, but I have to. But yeah, like he said, my day becomes super condensed, like condensed milk. By the time the Zinefest is coming, I'm like, everything has to be done in like now.
Yes.
They should have that class at art school, and also like music school, the organization class, teach you how to like use calendars and scheduling, and that stuff used to be, I used to have zero interest in that, and then as I got older, I realized like how important schedules are and routines are, and the power
it's really important, but it's hard to,
it's hard
when you're creating and you're like really in the zone. It's very hard to sort of think about those things or switch it off, turn it on, turn it off. I mean, that's part of being professional, is sort of learning how to do that. But yeah, I've been very busy lately. I mean, I'm trying to put stuff out there and go, do some shows and things like that. And then I don't have any time for drawing. I've got like my regular sort of work commissions, and I've got all this stuff that I want to do, and it's hard to find the time. I've had a bit of time last Friday, and I just sat down, I just drew all day, and I got so much done. And I'm like, I just want to do this all day, every day. But it can be hard sometimes. So you do have to sort of juggle these things, But for a long time, I was just sort of sitting around drawing all the time. So I don't know. You got to sort of figure out the balance for yourself, I guess.
But I do, I have a luxury of scheduling a vacation to just draw. I've done that before, where I'm like, okay, I need to get this project done. I'll schedule 2 weeks vacation so that I can work 8 hours on one project for 2 weeks. And I'm blessed and super grateful I can do that. But I've worked 20 years at one place, so thank God I could do that. But that is very necessarily, like you have to create. I do anyway, and that's why I use timers, because I will start drawing, and if I don't set a timer for a meeting, I'll draw right through it. I won't even think about it. So,
how about you, Ivy?
What's that?
How about Ivy?
Oh, for scheduling my timing. Yeah, I work pretty obsessively, and even if I'm not working all the time, I'm like thinking about it all the time. So because of that, I find that I have to I consider rest as a part of my work practice, because otherwise I would be burnt out, which is for artists. Yeah. So I do like to make lists, and definitely when I get closer to the project end date, it goes from do this little portion a day to you wake up, you're working on it. When you go to sleep, it better be done. Which, I try to get better at that. But also there's just little things. There's a lot of administrative work to it too that nobody sees. Today it's looking like after this, I'm probably going to go to a comic book shop and try to restock them with my zines. And then then I'll take time to work on a project I was commissioned for. And sometimes a day grupy work just looks like me getting bad art out and me doodling and trying to go with the flow of it. Yeah. And even a lot of the content for the zines I've made, it wasn't I'm going to publish the zine. A lot of it was just comic journal entries where when I realized I wanted to make zines out of it, I had to compile them together. So everyone's process looks different.
That's a really important thing you said about some days, what was it? Some days, all you do is get bad art out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was I wish I could adopt that a lot more. I got onto that idea when I was much older, that you're not going to have bad days, and bad work are part of the process. And when I was younger, I just wanted to put out gems all the time, which is impossible, and there was nobody around me to say, hey, this isn't how it actually works. When you see somebody show, it's the best stuff.
Right.
You don't
there's some things of that. I mean, yes, sometimes I'll do something and I think it's terrible, but the next day I look at it and go, actually, it wasn't as bad. So you can't judge it. And Andy Warhol says that, you've got to let other people judge your art. You just keep making it while they're judging it. And
but in the same token too, one thing an art teacher told me that is very, very valuable is if you hate something, don't show it to anybody if you're submitting it, because invariably that's the one they're going to pick.
Yes, so that will happen. That's a good one.
What is it?
What's his name? The Dinotopia guy, Dale.
James Gurney.
James Gurney, yes. So he writes some very good books about illustration. One called Imaginative Realism, where it's really very interesting. He does very sort of realistic sort of paintings, did a lot of National Geographic art, and he's a big believer in eliminating. He's got this thing he calls the oculum infernum, which is a big laser glass thing that he focuses the sun to set fire to all his bad stuff, so that it doesn't see the light of the world. So I don't know. I'm not very good at that. I tend to hang on to everything. But yeah.
I love that.
That's a segue into a question that Amber had, which was, is there a zine that you've seen that you didn't create that you really admired? I can say that I discovered Rania Telmacher, who draws the children's books like Smile and Sister at Ape, and I bought her zines, and I wanted to kill myself when I saw her stuff. So is there a zine or a zine artist that you go, wow, really admire this maker.
I have so many, too many to name.
Okay,
That's a big question.
I'm
But
sorry.
the
Blame
first one,
Amber. I just want to talk about Zardoz.
the first one that comes to mind is A1 Mance when she did the Black Bears series. Was just freaking hilarious, and I just had to get it. Couldn't stop laughing because we don't see that in mainstream or even in indie stuff. Black bears, and she did a zine of just all different types of black bears, and I thought it was freaking awesome.
That's a
You
good.
mean-
That's a good philosophy for zine.
Meaning gay black men that
Okay,
are
it
bigger,
was-
and, bigger and heavier.
I had a follow-up question, but thank you for that.
Yeah,
not grizzly
you hit on a
bears.
you hit on a good thing there for zines. Like if you look at your zine and you think, now would a mainstream publisher be interested in this? And if the answer is no, then it's probably a good zine.
Good. Oh.
Yeah, even though I dislike the message, I admire Chick Tracks just because of the format and the low quality printing.
And the distribution method that they
yeah,
would just
it's-
randomly appear somewhere.
That was the interesting thing that it Ape. I realized that there were people who hated Chick Tracks, and I hate them, but they still collect them because they admire them as they were one of the proto-zines.
Are they like Jesus tracks? But
Yeah, they're very Christian. There's a famous one in Dungeons and Dragons. We're all very familiar with this one, where about the evils of D&D, and it's a evil satanic cult and all against Jesus and all this sort of stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and he would go around and he'd leave these all around. I found one in the laundrette in San Francisco, and yeah, he leaves them around. I think he's still going, but yes, and he has a large number of them now, and they're all about how you got to turn your life around to Jesus, and like people doing like the things that people do, but it leads them to terrible ends.
I wish I would have thought of that as a kid. They used to leave them all around the hood. Gosh, I've seen some. I wish I would have thought to collect them. Never even thought to.
They're interesting because they're black and white newsprint, and then the covers were a slightly higher quality paper. It's single staple bound. But the interesting thing is they're parodied a lot. So the parodies interest me as much as the actual Chick Tracks. But their money, they get people to buy them, and then they just leave them everywhere. And I suspect that 99% of them get thrown away. It's a great racket.
Yes, that's how he does. Yes, people like who want to spread the word can go and they can sign up and get a bunch of these things and go and leave them around everywhere.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
he doesn't have to do it all himself.
People like, how can I do good in the world? I'll spread these around.
Yeah, I'll litter.
Yeah, good. I like
confusing because there's comics, so that's good.
But is there you're all zine artists. You've looked at different types of publishing. Do you see yourselves maybe doing something like a webcomic, or is that just because I don't know what the future of comics is coming to? I've seen webcomics rise and fall. I've seen magazines appear and go under. Do you guys have any thoughts on what the future is? And Amber says the future of comics, and then
Amber's head exploded.
Cue the music. Cue the dramatic music.
Right, I'm bringing Amber on. Amber's like making all sorts of. Okay, Dan, you're going. I'm replacing.
Yeah, bye. Good pleasure, everyone.
Yeah.
Good to see you again.
Come back again.
Good to see you again, Avy.
Bye, Dale.
Amber's
I'll see you
got
in the side.
Say something here. Oh wait, did I just have all of us? Oh no, look, I had all of us. Oh no, look, we're all here.
Oh
that's good.
God, we do look like the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
The limit.
Yes. The thought
I thought
of
I
a
was
web.
have six.
There's a story of a
Brady.
So
The thought of a web comic, because I don't do digital. I was gonna say the thought of web comics because I don't do digital is just like mind blowing. Like, oh
You can do
yeah,
it.
I'm sure I could, but just the anxiety that happens just thinking about it. I'm like, no, ma'am.
Yeah, I've been watching the whole time, and one of my questions was: is there a zine that you own that you bought that's like it? I mean, Dale asked it kind of what who has blown your mind in the zine world and stuff, but I'm thinking like an individual one that you could describe that, like when you think of man, like I wish I had thought of that. Like we were talking about the chick tracks.
Does Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 count?
It started out as a Nash can, so yes.
That one, I was like, damn, I wish I thought of that.
They pitched it to Marvel. Marvel said no, so they made Nash can. And Kitchen Sink Press was the first publisher of Turtles, I want to say, or no, it was somebody else besides Kitchen Sink. And yeah, like they got published. It's good stuff. So.
I'm trying to think if there's one specific one. There's so many running through my mind.
Yeah, there's so many. It's really hard to pick one. Like I think of one, and then immediately I think of another one.
Well, describe some of them. Then don't pick one. Pick any of them that you can think of.
There's one I can think of.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was doing an internship at this company called Morning Breath in New York, and they had a bunch of things that they get sent either by their friends who are artists, and one of them was this graffiti writer named Mike Giant, who's from Albuquerque actually, and he did this zine which was a mixture of drawing, writing, and photography. And for some reason I had always thought that if you were doing a zine you had to stick to one thing, and to see him kind of mix it up was really cool. And I don't remember the name of it, but it was like a perfect bound zine, and it was a little bit thicker than your normal, but it had a bunch of stuff from like a trip to Japan, and I was really blown away by it.
Nice.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yes, you can mix it up, and again, that sort of goes back to the early thing of zines being sort of punk zines, where they're sort of photocopying and doing all that, with that very sort of punk black and white sort of aesthetic. But yeah, they would be more sort of wide ranging, I suppose, on topics, and like a comic or a cartoon or a drawing would just be part of it. Yeah, so you can really do it however you want, can't you? Yeah.
One thing, this is, I don't know if this is a rough segue. Maybe it's a non sequitur. I think, Ivy, you were talking about earlier how like zines have their own like flavor depending on where you are.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're like in Detroit or LA or Miami or whatever, it might be its like own kind of culture. And one of the things I've read about for years now is how like the internet is like basically, since everyone can connect, these little pockets of culture are going away. So I think it's kind of interesting. And it used to be this way with music too. Nashville used to have a Nashville sound. New York used to have a New York sound. LA had a LA sound. And then since the internet age, all these producers are flying all over the place. And also you can, produce stuff like you don't need to be in LA to produce stuff that's being recorded in LA. So, I mean, it almost sounds like zines can help preserve some of these pockets of culture, which I think is kind of cool. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's nice that everyone's connected now, but I also think you'll get this watered down kind of diluted thing. And when I think about like music, like the pockets where music came out of and how original it was, because it was just being developed in Seattle. It was this little pocket, I think that's kind of cool. Like this local cultural pocket that maybe zines could, help develop.
Well, there's very few zine editors. It's usually just a direct conduit from the creator out onto the page. And
like that too.
Whether you're making it yourself or you're sending it to a printer, I think that's amazing. Like I've seen some zines that are poetry. I've seen one, the most amazing one I ever saw was a pop-up zine. So it was a tiny little pop-up book. It was only 8 pages. It was amazing. But it has some of the most complex pop-up stuff that I'd ever seen, little tabs that you can pull. And, when you opened it up, it jumped out at you. And this person was selling it for like $15, I think, because it was made out of a heavier cardstock. But it's one of my most prized possessions is that book. I'm like, try convincing a publisher of that.
Yeah, pop-up books are, they're very hard to produce, aren't they? Yeah.
Actually,
They're handmade.
that was something I was thinking of doing, and as you said, figuring out the production and logistics of actually doing a pop-up book that is viable, is realistic. It's really hard. Yeah. But
There's
I'm sorry. One of my favorite artists is Cameron Forsley. I met him at one of my first Zine Fest, and all I want to say, Tat Rat is one of my favorite zines. It's an ongoing series of zines and like mini comics. And he was super, super nice and welcoming when I first got into zines, and so his work is super amazing, and I love his style. If you check out his Instagram, you kind of see a similarity because I love his ink work, and he actually does tattoos, and he did recently move to New Mexico as well. But yeah, his work is amazing, and it has odd subject matter, kind of controversial subject matter sometimes, but I really like Tat Rat. That's one zine that I can just look at and read over and over and over.
What's going on with New Mexico? Are the artists going there? What's happening?
Yeah, Cameron's a buddy of mine. We're both in Mission Mini Comics too. I just saw him at Halloween time in his tattoo shop. I'm gonna tell him you said all this, Avy. He's gonna be thrilled.
Man, I love that dude's work. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he's very down to earth too. Because I was so little when I joined Mission Mini, and they were all like adult, like developed artists, and they just took me right under their wing, which was
he's a good guy.
Awesome. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, he's got his kids and his wife down here too. Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like the question oh, what zine stuck out to you? It's such a big question for me because like just being in the zine community, it's like I admired Avy. Now Avy and I are friends. Like I really admired Vanessa X. You and I are Zinefest. We're really good friends now too. Korea Angry, Yunsu, she talks about a really unique experience of like, her personal experience of immigrating from Korea to America, and a lot about like that self-awareness and perception thing. I don't know. That's what I love about Zine Fests. You meet all these people, and then you leave, and suddenly all the people you admired are your friends, and some of them want to collaborate with you. Like that blew my mind that there was a place like.
That's a very nice thing about sort of comics and the hobby in general, I think, is that, you can, your heroes are like right there, that you can walk right up to them and talk to them generally, unless they're some sort of superstar. But generally they're pretty accessible, and you can get to know them and hang out with them. And
Yunso is amazing. I'll put her link in the chat. Her work just will crack you up and make you think at the same time. Will make you cry and laugh. It's just snot cry too, because her stuff is so touching. But it's hilarious because she's very straightforward, and something about the translation from Korean to English too, where it's very blunt, and I love that. But it hits right on the head, like on the mark. So her zines and creativity is awesome too. I'm freaking hilarious. It's so hilarious.
Oh, these are like little puppet comics.
But she'll put them in print. She'll put them in print form.
Nice.
Yeah, but we're both from the same area, LA. So I went to her studio once, and I like saw the puppet, and she was just so funny with it too, because she was like, "Yeah, Ivy, look at my little puppet," and it was like in a robe, and she like opens the robe, and it had boobs, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
Oh man.
Yeah, this is the story of my life.
I'm just reading through some of these.
I'm reading.
I kind of like just the uncensored stuff. Like just it's like your brain with no filter.
Yep. No filter.
What's the interesting thing about zines is the experimentation nature of them.
Back somehow.
If I stop screen sharing, it'll help. Yeah. So that's good. Yes, she was. I like that character. She was reminding me. I had a little gnome character in my comic that was a sort of carried on a bit like that. It was very nice to have a character like that where you can just sort of let it all out. I don't know. Yes, I don't know. Do you guys like that? Are you doing more fiction or non-fiction? I mean, I'm always doing non-fiction, and I get into character creation or characters, and my characters will sort of take over and say all these things, and they'll be partly somebody else, but really I know that they're me. Some part of me that's coming out. Yeah. I don't know, but that is very different from doing something that's more reality based, I suppose.
Well, I make fun of myself a lot. I mean, even though it's me, I usually make jokes a lot out of my health issues and stuff. But then there's some serious elements to it too. But usually I'm just trying to process it and get through it. And I use humor in my personal life, so my zines and comics are gonna be hopefully funny. I hope people are laughing with me. And even the more heavier subject matter, I try to present it in a way where you can relate to it and not necessarily find humor in stuff like microaggressions or racial bias, but you can relate to it and find it as not only disturbing or traumatic or horrible, but just like how absurd some stuff is. Just like, oh my God, like for real? Like really? You know what I mean? Like the sarcastic element and the satire element of it, the irony. But yeah, I like making stuff that's not necessarily fictional, like bless you. But that is stuff that is I use myself as subject matter. But then I do like fantasy, horror, gore, killing people with zombies and vampires and all kind of weird stuff. But so I have that dichotomy too.
You guys are inspiring me. I'm actually having the thought like, hey, maybe I should try to make a zine.
Maybe. You should do it.
I have a paper cutter.
Chris is a good doodler. You're a good doodler.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's not. I guess I'm not sad about it or anything. But I started off drawing, and then it kind of got pushed out of me by parental figures. Somehow I got onto music, but I used to draw a lot until maybe 8th grade. Then I got serious about my life.
Okay, so let's talk about writing and drawing and the difference. I mean, zine sort of involves both skills. I tend to think of myself more as a drawer than a writer, but I like doing both, or I wouldn't do both. But I don't know. I always sort of feel I know what I'm doing a bit more with drawing than I do with writing, but I think I can write okay. But those are interesting things that come in. Yeah, I don't know. How do you all feel about that?
I stopped taking myself so seriously as a writer and just sort of let it be plain and very honest. I did start as thinking I was going to be a new American poet laureate. I thought I was so good at writing poetry till I went to poetry reading. I was like, oh, this is horrible, and so is my stuff. So I cured myself of that fairly early. Like, oh no, this sucks so bad. So then I just started doing cartoons and comics, which I could be more free and just not care as much. It's all tongue in cheek and zany.
Yes. What about you, Rob?
I think at first it was just kind of well, I'll speak about kids' books. For me, it was a process of reading a lot. So the visuals came a little bit more naturally, but writing, I just had to read tons and tons of books. And then through that, I began to understand a better grasp of flow and structure. And because, as a parent, there are kids' books that your kid will pick up and you'll be like, all right, great, let's read that one, because it has a flow to it or it has a natural rhythm, and it makes it so that way when you put it down, you could read it again. But there are other books where you're just like, oh my God, not that one again, because they're too long, or it's way too wordy, or the story itself doesn't make sense. And so I do try to work on that craft to make it something that's a pleasure to read. And there are those moments where I get down on myself, but in general, I try to just go with the flow and read tons of other people's work to understand what are they doing that I really like.
Rob, did you want to write kids' books, or did you have kids and then decided it was something you were interested in? Which is, me and Chuck did a kids' book a few years ago, and I know I never would have written it if I didn't have a kid. But when you have a kid, you read a lot of kids' books, and sometimes you go, I think I can do better than this.
Yeah, it's definitely having a child allows you to see the world through new eyes, through fresh eyes. Like as we become older and adult, we're used to things where we understand how things work, or we get jaded, but a kid will genuinely ask a question of like, why is that the way it is? And so I think becoming a parent definitely made me want to do it. If I had become a dad, I don't think I would have done it.
Yeah, me either, for sure.
Yeah, definitely me too. I mean, I sort of suddenly sort of shifted, I sort of slowly shifted gears into sort of doing more sort of children's oriented work and all that. And it was very fun. But now my son's 20, I'm sort of going back to what I was doing before somewhat. But but then you grow and change all the time. Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm probably thinking that there's like 0 people without kids that are writing kids books.
And it's funny you should say that, Chris, because I was writing kids books when I didn't have kids. I just
one day I'll start with a book, but then later.
I think there's a lot of kids books out there that talk down to children. So I wanted to make books that had a voice that didn't insult the kid reading it, so asking them to solve puzzles and mysteries and flow of language, having rhyme schemes and rhythm and flow in the language, like Rob was discussing, helps the story come alive. And so I feel like there's not a lot of eyes on kids' books where people are scrutinizing it, so you can be a little bit more experimental. And so that's what I was doing. So you're like, who doesn't have kids making kids books? And I'm like,
I believe that Maurice Sendak didn't have children, and I think that Theodore Geisel didn't have children either.
Maurice Sendak, and I don't think he liked kids. Isn't that part of it?
Yeah.
And I can't remember, did Shel Silverstein have kids?
That's a good question.
The other guy, that's where the wild things are, right?
Maurice Sendak,
is
Sendak is where the wild
Sendak is where the wild things are.
Oh wow, that's amazing that he didn't have kids.
Yeah.
I believe he was gay.
Yeah, I think he was gay. Yes, I think
That doesn't mean he couldn't have kids. I mean,
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah, Sendak was, and I don't know about Shel Silverstein. I don't know if he had kids or not.
He's an interesting dude.
But
I want to ask Ivy a little bit about her process with the writing and the drawing, because this is always very fascinating to me about comics. Is where I mean, I sort of do comics because they're like, I think they're the most difficult thing to do. You're trying to do all these different things at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, like I feel like with comics, most of all, I love to do them. Like that's what got me into them. I just was always drawing them. And like sometimes I would write out my feelings and I felt like there were words couldn't express it. Like I had to add an illustration to it. And that's what I've been doing for like years and years. But I think a big part of like my art practice personally is that if I'm not feeling a drawing or I'm not liking the direction or the flow of it, then I like change it up. And I think that's what makes my storytelling like help. I think it benefits my storytelling because I feel like as long as I'm not bored with what I'm letting unfold and then I know that someone reading it, it's likely they're not going to get bored either. I think the only time I ran into like changing my format was recently. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Mouse by Art Spiegelman, the Holocaust graphic novel. Yeah, so my grandma is a Holocaust survivor, and I had a lot of people encourage me. They were like, hey, what if you interviewed her and made it into a zine? And I was like, yeah, I'll just do that. It'll be easy.
That's a big one. Yeah, you're competing with like what's possibly considered the greatest like underground piece of work.
Yeah. And when I interviewed her, and then like it was like it took hours interviewing her, and then when I finished it, it's like it took me a while to listen to it because it was traumatic, and like I understood more about my Jewish identity than I ever did. And then when I got down to the paper of it, none of it is illustrated. I did not have it in me to illustrate anything that she said, and it would have been forced if I did. I'm not Art Spiegelman. this isn't Mouse.
No,
What
and he got a lot of things about. Yes, sorry, he got a lot of criticism really, or not criticism, but a lot of questions about why are you doing cats and mice? But you just sort of explained it there, and that it was really hard to put images to like these stories. Yeah.
Exactly. For me, I used gold in it. Like I used gold leaf for certain illustrations because I felt like it was important to illustrate it with gold because in the Holocaust, that's exactly what they took away from Jewish, like all victims of the Holocaust, they took away their gold amongst other things. But that was a really big one. So that was more important to me, just like creating images with gold than anything I could have illustrated comic style. And then in addition to that, I like photography. That was my first time really having a zine that had such an emphasis on photography because even though there were no photos of the Holocaust, naturally there were photos of my family when my grandma survived, living her life. And I felt like that was such a powerful message. I mean, I'm going to produce it in 2023 because it's ready. I just don't know how to produce it. It's huge. But yeah, like I felt like that was more important to capture like actual photos of Jewish joy to conclude a story that's about so much pain,
Wow. Amazing.
Yes, great.
Yeah, good for you for telling that story. It's a hard story to tell, but it's one that people need to hear to remember that happened. And
But also showing joy too, as
Yeah.
surviving, showing joy. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's an amazing story to tell. Good for you.
That's the most important thing I think about zine fests and alternate press is you don't see these stories necessarily in the mainstream. So you can go to a zine fest and you'll find somebody's personal story about a subject that you know nothing about, and it grows you as a person because you see that this is just another person with a different life.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to learn so much more about my grandma through that. And for her too, like now she knows what a zine is. And like she said she already read it like 4 times over. Like you always think, oh, someone doesn't want to share that story. It's too traumatic and too scary. But like I found when I interacted with my grandma about that, it like at the end I was like, I don't know if she's told that. And when she even read it, she was like, I don't remember this. Yeah. Like she's like already forgotten a lot of the details.
Wow.
Yeah, good timing, capturing that,
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's fantastic. Well, I think that's probably a good point to end it on. Thank you very much for that story, Ivy. That's great to think about that, and the work that zines can do in conveying like very powerful and difficult stories that are very intensely personal and emotional, and they're the stories that are not ready for the mainstream yet, or mainstream's not ready for them, and but they will in the future. These are the stories that in another 20 years they'll be what media is really focusing on, and they'll say, oh well, people in zines were doing this 20 years ago. But yeah.
And you can actually meet the person creating it and know that it's their personal story too, which a lot of times at book fairs and art fairs or bigger events, you don't get to actually walk up and have that conversation and be able to relate to it. And maybe you have an experience or your grandmother has an experience that you can talk about.
Yes.
Chuck, are you going to put up the info on your Facebook page about Oakland Creates?
Yes, I have an event page. I can share that with you as well. Like I said, it's Sunday, December 4th at Oakstop, 1721 Broadway, 11 to 5. But we do have a Facebook event page, and I'll share that in the chat, and then hopefully folks will find more on the event page. Like I said, I post updates on Instagram, Twitter, and of course the event page as well. And just more information about who is tabling. I have quite a few more updates and highlights coming up, and some interviews and panels I definitely want to share. And again, so grateful for folks taking the time. Thank you guys all so much for being here, sharing your time with me, and talking about Oakland Creates. I super appreciate it. and I'm super grateful. Thank you guys so much for being generous with your time.
Come back.
Coming
You
on.
need people to talk to.
Yeah, anytime. Yes.
And
I'm
always
back, yeah.
I'm always open to talk about cannibals or zombies or any.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, we need to do. Yeah, we'll have you when we do a cannibal zombie special. We'll definitely have you.
I'm there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
I forgot that's the subject for you, yeah.
the subject meanders on this show.
All right, I just wanted to make a quick announcement. This Saturday at the New Farm in San Francisco, which is out by the bay there. It's like the Bay Natives Nursery and the New Farm. And the Seagulls, our friends the Seagulls house band, are shooting a music video there Saturday afternoon from 2:30 to 5-ish or so. And anybody and everyone is invited to show up.
And wear funny clothes if you want to. I know I will be doing that.
Yes.
I wear funny clothes every day. So.
Ooh, we just got a little comment here from Summerlee at the Cartoon Art Museum.
Hi, Summerlee.
Oh, okay.
Uh-oh.
We've angered them. That's good. All right. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Thank you, Avy Jetter, Ivy Rose, and Rob. Rob, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce your name right. Rob Trujillo. I can't say that. Say it right. Can you say your name, Rob?
Lou Trujillo.
Lou Trujillo. Oh, that wasn't too far. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, Oakland Creates, Sunday, December 4th. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
I'm going to play the theme music now.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Here's a theme song for Chuck Whelan Showy. He asked me to write one, but I stole from David Bowie. Here's a theme song. Chuck Whelan is the best. We have lots of hosts, but we're running out of gas. Will you be our guest on? Will you be our guest on? Beyond the Chuck Whelan Show.